Good evening, everybody. I think you all know who I am, but I'm Paul Drzezinski, the interim head of school. Before we get in the more formal part of the webinar, I do want to say a couple of things. The first is, in case there's any confusion at all, we are open for business for the rest of this year. That is a guarantee. Not only is that a guarantee, and I'll come back to this later, but we are going to provide the best possible experience that your kids could ever have in the last year of the school. So let me circle back and also say very quickly what we're going to do tonight. How did we get here? What steps have been taken? What's next? And then a Q&A session. I've been fortunate enough to be in the independent school world for over 40 years. And I want to start by saying that while I've only been here for 3 months, this community is an unbelievably warm and wonderful place to be a part of. And I understand why people are so sad today. It's heartbreaking, and we all know that. And we want you to know that we know that. It truly is. The people here, the community is so great that I told the kids this morning that while I'm not going to retire at the end of the school year, that if I were, the only reason to do so would be so I could say that the best experience at a school in the last 40 years for me was my last one. And that's the best way I can tell you how much this community means to me and to all of you. And with that, I'd like to introduce Alan Semeka, our board chair.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for bringing your 40 years experience in this environment to our to us during this tender time. I've had the pleasure of serving on the board for about 15 years now. I've been on the finance committee for most of that time. I have 2 daughters that have graduated from here, so I certainly appreciate the value of Elgin Academy.
Thank you, Alan. So let's just begin. How did we get here?
Well, Paul, 10 years of enrollment decline, certainly changing demographics in our region here, a changing landscape for independent schools. I think we've seen that in the region, and I think we've seen all throughout the Midwest, and some serious financial factors. I'll try to give you some details on these things. For the last 10 years, we've had this declining enrollment due to a number of factors. Much stronger public school choices for people, homeschooling, weakening local economy, economic challenges for our region here, and maybe a lot of parts of the country. Declining regional birth rate, really a factor, right? Less kids, less students. But there's been a serious shift in how today's parents feel about independent schools. Mm-hmm. It's simply different, right? So people aren't able to or willing to make the sacrifices that everyone viewing us tonight is probably made. Of course, COVID was complicated for us. We lost more than a third of our enrollment during COVID. The changing demographics are pretty simple to understand. The income levels in most of our 14 zip codes are simply down.
Yeah, I would say one of the really unfortunate things is while independent schools are struggling across the country, here at EA, we have all of the factors, not just 1 or 2 of them. It's like a storm in Elgin right now.
Yeah.
People probably know that even in the public school, the article came out this week that they're down close to 15% in students.
Yeah, in students in total, and then you've got this financial factors driving what happens in private schools. We've lost 3 of our prominent private school peers here since 2007. So it's been happening. The financial factors are complicated and enormous. In order to maintain the quality of the education the way that we have here at Elgin Academy, it's a $7 million a year operation. This last year, we brought in $3 million in tuitions. That's a $4 million gap. So over the years, that gap has grown to from something smaller to $4 million.
Yeah, can I talk a little bit about the gap? I do think that people don't quite understand the model in independent schools, which doesn't necessarily make sense, but literally no school charges the full tuition costs. And so that even if you're a full paying family, that tuition doesn't actually cover the cost, and that's why it's called a gap, and that's why schools have things like annual fund drives and auctions, things like that, major donors to close that gap. Our gap is approximately $4 million. If you were to look at spread that out over the 180 students that we have, that means that every student would have to pay $11,000 more than they're paying now, and that's if they were paying full pay. But we don't have 100% of our students paying full pay, so our gap is actually closer to $22,000, and that's not per family, that's per child or student.
Yeah, the gap widened for a lot of reasons, Paul. Over the years, we took on more and more families in need of financial aid, and we created a lot of beautiful things for that and extended this opportunity to a lot of families. But we adopted to the marketplace, if you will, and it's obviously a contributing factor.
The financial aid that's helped people is a wonderful thing, and that's part of the reason I've enjoyed the school so much is the rich diversity that's here that really makes this a better place.
It's been wonderful, but in the end, the finances are a result of the school not being able to find in the marketplace enough families willing to make the sacrifices that we have here.
So can you tell our families a little bit about what steps the board has taken or what the administration?
Well, there have been lots of board members before me, but since I've been here, you've got this development of new programs. You've got this rebranding that we went through, this massive investment in marketing really lately, and then just sort of a financial feasibility and financial accountability. To give you some details there. The development of new programs included early childhood, where we thought we would be able to reach out to very young families. As you imagine, getting them to find early summer programs gave kids of any age kind of a chance to come and try Elgin Academy. That was helpful. The PEAK program for kids struggling with dyslexia. That was was a nice idea a couple of years ago. And then the international program has always been very, very good to us. A very robust international program, but international politics have changed that. But the reality of all of these great ideas and this kind of outreach is that it just wasn't enough to compensate for the number of for the decline in enrollment as a result of kind of this changing landscape of private schools. So maybe 10 years ago or so, we gave up our more traditional logo for kind of a softer brand, which experts told us was what people were looking for, sort of softened our edges, so to speak. Beyond that, we got very invested in digital marketing recently, changed our website, spent a lot of energy on search engine optimization. So when you Google private school or private school education, certainly we were something that onlookers had to see. We engaged all sorts of experts in marketing, outreach for education. The development in the admissions department just did a terrific job of cooperating, embracing all those things. But again, despite spending $1 million in the last 3 years, we have actually less kids now than we had before we spent $1 million. The market's simply shrinking. In terms of financial accountability, right? There's two ways to make this work. One is add income by adding students, and the other is reduce your costs. Well, the board and the administration have always been very firm about not changing the quality of the education. We're never going to diminish the quality of education that families came to expect from
Well, I can tell you one of the things that I did when I first got here was the proverbial kind of starting to kick the tires a little bit to see, what is it that we're not doing here? Why aren't students coming here? And I thought, well, maybe we'd find some reasons, but I can assure you that that's just not the case. The quality and caliber of both the program and the faculty and staff here really is incredible. And the challenge is, if you cut those costs, if you say, well, we have to save money, which most corporations do, then you're losing the very essence of what it is that we offer. So we already have people struggling to pay the full tuition or not wanting to. Why would they then go forth and do that when they're not even getting what it is that we do best?
Yeah, serving on finance committee for many years, we've focused on maintaining the education and looked for other places to save money. We did all the saving in places that would be imperceptible that we could, but again, here we are. We did that with outside experts. Certainly there were experts among us. And at the same time, we did all the things you would expect us to do. We had audit, financial auditors all the time, helping to compare us to other schools and doing everything we could. Our problem is again attracting more families.
Right.
Paul, there is finances available for you and your life skill set, your life's expertise to really do the best job you can to do a great job with the rest of this school year. So I think the board's got you set up for success.
I think what Alan is trying to say is what's next and where are we at now today? And so I do want to point out these 4 things that we're going to do. The first and foremost is we're going to focus on this year. We're going to support the faculty and staff in their employment journey. We're going to support students and families as they transition to new schools. And ultimately, we're going to celebrate our EA community. So let's talk about focusing on this year. We had a incredibly difficult, and not surprisingly, wonderful meeting with your children this morning. And I think you guys would be so proud of how they conducted themselves and what they said and the kinds of questions they asked. And one of the things that they were quite concerned about, understandably, is what about the things that are happening? Are we still going to have J-term? Is graduation going to happen? What's going to look like? And I want to be really clear, as I said at the outset, that not only are we going to remain open for the rest of the year, but we're going to make this the best year ever. And the faculty is committed to that in every possible way. In terms of the support, and I'm going to blend the faculty and staff with the students to let you know that, for example, by 12 o'clock today, my email, I was inundated from my colleagues across the Chicago and suburban school land with emails asking, what can we do to help your students? We'd love to have your students at our school. What can we do to help your faculty and staff? We're all going to have openings in the coming months for next year. We'd love to meet with them. What can we do to help? And so we're figuring that out, but we're going to be having what are called open houses and job fairs, and reaching out to all the different schools in this community to help the kids and to help the faculty and staff. In terms of the junior class, I think you're all aware by now that we have put a program in place to allow the juniors an opportunity to receive an EA diploma by the end of the summer. And we're going to move up the college counseling process for them to help them. Doug and Ashley have been terrific about trying to put together something, and we'll be meeting with all of the families so that they can get a jump start on that, so that when they do leave at the end of the year or at the end of the summer, they're in a very strong position for their college application process. And then finally, let's talk about how we celebrate the EA community, because you guys deserve that more than anything. I don't know if you had a chance to see the article in the Tribune this afternoon, but it pointed out there that we are planning on celebrating Founders Day, for example, that was already being planned, but lots of different ways that we can make this spring and this winter special for the kids. That's where our focus is going to be.
Yeah, great, Paul. There's some questions that came in early. We promised everyone some Q&A time here.
Thank you. So, yeah, look at the slide there. Obviously, post your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And I see that a couple have already come in. So the first one, is there a possibility that someone or several donors will step up and make an investment large enough to save EA? Well, I'll jump in and you can respond there. It's a wonderful thought. We would love for that to happen. But let's go back to the financial numbers. We have a $4 million gap. So just to keep the doors open next year, we would need $4 million now for next year. And that's just to open the doors. That's not maintaining the campus or improving any of the programs or doing any upgrades of any kind. And as you mentioned about what some donors said to you.
That assumes that enrollment stays the same too, so. And again, it's been declining for a decade. This actually happened, we sat down with investors or donors who had significant capacity with which to do something like this, and that was exactly their question. If we gap it this year, what are we gonna do next year? And you know, we demonstrated here that our model simply isn't working anymore. So we would need a $4 million donor year after year. It's unfortunate.
Well, actually, I'm gonna skip the next one. There's one question that's related to that. So could the admissions department have done a better job to bring in more students? Well, I can answer that very quickly just to say, I want to be clear, this is not an admissions problem. This is an enrollment problem. And in the greater Elgin community, we don't have enough families who either want to be in a school like Elgin Academy or can afford to be in a school like ours.
Yeah, but at some point, Paul, all of us that were involved with this took a very serious look at admissions, right? That's the first place you look at. Are we doing admissions wrong? And in the last 3 years, especially, I may mention we spent about $1 million. The admissions department was very open-minded and open-armed about, okay, how do we do anything we can do? No shortage of experts helped us to turn over every stone to discover that there just isn't willing families. There just isn't a market.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, so I can't point to admissions.
no, not at all. Can you reduce tuition and bring in a lot more students?
Boy, we looked at this. You know, this is sort of one of the natural go-to models, right? If we cut the tuition in half, we'd get lots more kids. We would be giving up a lot of the tuition that we're collecting. We might get more kids, but now we've got another overhead to cover as we go from the school of 180 to the 500 students we have capacity for. So we found that model didn't work in our case either. But a great question.
Yeah. Well, related to that in some ways are what % of the students are receiving financial aid? Well, I can tell you roughly 68%, which again is a wonderful thing in terms of our community and what that brings to the table. However, again, with the financial model of independent schools, you need sort of a flip. You need most schools, and you can go on their websites because they all show their little boxes for their how they spend their revenue. You will look and you'll see it's almost flipped. It's almost that you have 68 or 70% of full paying families and 30% of financial aid. And so that's part of the challenge of the answer of both the numbers and cutting them in half and having more students.
Yeah, of course, the number wasn't always 68%.
Right.
You know, it grew over time.
Why don't we just trim divisions? Why don't we just have a high school or just have a K-8 school or just have a K-5 school?
Paul, that too is a great question, and we worked really hard on that math also. To try to summarize it, it's sort of like we'd have all the same overhead, simply subtract the teachers from that division, and now subtract the income from that division, which is more than the cost of the teachers for that division, and the math gets worse. So the opposite of that's very true, that the overheads here greatly for 100 kids more, right? We could fit more kids into the class.
Right.
It's the declining enrollment here that's
Yeah, and there's also a couple of other factors. One is the hardest divisions to raise money for in schools in the United States are the youngest grades. Families commit and give money to their colleges, to their high schools, and then they get to the elementary schools. So that's part of the struggle of having just a lower school. And in fact, when you look at some of the schools that have closed recently, certainly like Da Vinci and some others, those were K-8 schools. And the other one is a strictly educational challenge, because one of the great things about our program and eventually a high school is that when the kids go to college, they are looked on by their professors of having like advanced skills and the abilities. And the problem then becomes, if we only have a high school, where do we find families who all of a sudden in 7th and 8th grade decide they want to spend those dollars for a high school, a private high school, and where are the kids prepared? What schools are they going to that would prepare them to get into our high schools? Because Elgin Academy lower school and middle school prepares them for our high school. So that's also a problem.
Your experience as an educator would help us understand the complexity of that.
Right, right. There are a couple of more questions here. Can the school change from a private school to a charter school as part of Elgin?
Well, there is a charter school in town, Elgin Math and Science Academy. They do a fine job over there. There is actually, as I understand it, very specific legislation that says you can't convert a private school to a charter school, or of course, everyone would simply do it. Charter school becomes a burden to the local public school district in some ways, in that the kids that go to that charter school end up getting the money that would have gone to the greater proportion of the money that would have gone to the public school, so to the traditional public school. So the local school district would have to agree to that idea, and then we draw from 14 zip codes, and the charter school doesn't, so it wouldn't be a fit for everybody. But again, there's legislation that prevents it.
Thank you. There's another question. I answered some of it. Will other schools be coming to EA to recruit families, and how soon will this happen? Which schools are interested in taking EA kids? The answer to the first part of the question, will schools be coming? Yes, absolutely, they will be coming. When and how soon they will happen? Well, I want to assure people that as difficult as this decision is, and I'm not trying to mitigate it in any way, by making the decision now, we are able to still be in the cycle for other schools, because every admission application for the various independent schools in this area, they typically don't close till January, or December. So the time is right to do that. So we expect that we would have the actual admissions open house from other schools probably right after Thanksgiving, but that's something I need to, as I said, have already reached out to the other independent schools in the area. They've reached back to me. Bonita has talked to several schools this morning, as a matter of fact, who showed interest in this area. So we will be circling back to you on that.
The next question, maybe we touched on, what was the main feedback from potential funders on why they could not donate or invest in the school? And I think the answer, there were a lot of very thoughtful conversations on this topic, but in the end, the answer was there wasn't anything significant that we could do with $4 or $5 or $10 million to change the way the whole model works to be self-sustaining again. As another question points out, the enrollment dropped in the past, but there were things that we were able to do to find more families. We put tremendous effort into reaching out for more families this past 3 years, especially, and it's yielded no new families. So we would need an investor again, year after year after year.
Have you considered selling some of the assets to help fill the gap?
Well, when the gap was less significant, we did sell off some real estate holdings. We had some apartments that we owned and managed, that we bought for a little and sold for a lot. So those things were helpful. But in the recent years of these massive gaps, we've depleted the endowment and sold off those assets, trying to do what you're talking about here, trying to stay another day to find another solution.
Along those lines, with the school closing, will the property be sold, and if so, who will benefit?
We have a wonderful relationship with First American Bank. They have been very cooperative, been very helpful. Ultimately, First American Bank would be a part of that kind of a decision. But they've been just terrific supporters. I can't say enough good things about working with them. We've had a loan with them for more than a decade now. They've just been terrific partners in all this. So that would be they would be involved in that decision.
I'd like to close with this question, because it's a great question, which is, what is the plan to keep everyone, students and teachers, engaged and focused on getting a great education with this many distractions? And I want to circle back a little bit to what I said earlier, but reiterate how proud you would have been if you had been in the room this morning to see how your children accepted this news and what their questions were and how they responded. Because how they responded within some tears and sadness was also wanting to know, as I said, what are the things that they can do. And I talked to you that we're going to be doing by J-term and all of the traditions that exist, but they immediately started talking about, well, can we have a all-school trip somewhere in January, or can we have an all-school field trip, or can we do things? And people started talking about whether or not we can have a prom for the whole school. So of course there are distractions, so to speak, right now, but I think given a little bit of time and given with the incredible resilience that I think our kids have, there's going to be lots of positive things and steps that the kids are going to come up with. The faculty and staff have already started meeting today and talking about what are these other special opportunities and special things that we can do, little things that may not mean a lot to you, but we were brainstorming this afternoon about every single kid and the student being able to go to the different spaces, because some of the kids have been here for 10, 12 years, and to have sort of walking tours within the campus, which again, may not sound like a lot to you, but are incredibly meaningful to the kids. And we're going to try and build on a series of those kinds of things. And again, I want to just repeat, the focus on this year is going to be directly on the students and improving and maintaining their experience.
What a great time for me to say thank you for your lifetime of expertise. Well, really, it's just terrific to have you here doing this time.
We thank you for those kind words. And again, this is an incredibly wonderful community who are now going through an incredibly tough situation. There are some questions that we didn't get to tonight. Please, we will see on the state of the school. If you send those questions to the state of the school at Elgin Academy, we will circle back to you and answer those questions. You are welcome to reach out to either of us in the coming days for further conversation as well. This webinar is recorded, as you know, so it will be on the website tomorrow. So if you didn't hear something or you want to see it again, you can do that. Also, if you have family members or friends who would hope to attend but couldn't, the webinar will be up on the website tomorrow. So truly, from the bottom of my heart and from the board and Alan, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And I really hope, even if you didn't get your questions tonight, and that you will follow up with us, because we may not be able to give you the answer that you want, but we do want to be able to answer all your questions.
Please reach out. We want to be helpful.
So, thank you and good night.